Nostalgia can be a time machine that brings us back to a period in our lives that, maybe we still try to get back to, and sometimes even trying to buy our way back to that. I know for me, whenever something is released related to Donkey Kong Country, I'm there. So a few years ago, when a small indie label called Cartridge Thunder released an album called Banana Jamz, I was instantly intrigued. And when I got the album, I was delighted with the final product, and I did do an album review on that, which you could watch elsewhere on my channel. Now, with the release of this album, I was actually really interested by one thing that I remember seeing on the album jacket, which was, it talked about the mechanical licensing of it. And as soon as I saw that, I was kind of intrigued to know more. How does this whole process work? How can someone release an album, do a remix, and have kind of a wide distribution? I wanted to know the kind of nitty-gritty details of that. So luckily, the gentleman at Cartridge Thunder, Jack, as well as the composer Josh Willis, sat down with me for an interview to talk a little bit about the process of putting this album together and what the future holds for future releases from the record label. Thanks a lot, guys, for joining us. So maybe you could start by introducing yourselves, kind of tell us who you are and what you do.
So I'm Jack Pochop. I'm the label manager at Cartridge Thunder, which is a Chicago-based record label.
And I'm Josh. I'm the main, musician behind the construction and arrangement and recording of Banana Jamz and some of the other stuff for Cartridge Thunder.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, guys. It's I've been wanting to chat with you fellas for a while because I love the record that you guys put out. I'm trying to remember how I initially found it. I think it was through the sort of needle drop video on YouTube. I think I was just searching one day, like Donkey Kong remixes or something like that. And that's, I think, how I found you guys.
Yeah, I do remember.
That's awesome.
I sent Josh the video, and we were both like, this guy just did like an 8-minute video on this record.
Thanks for all the kind words in the review. That was so cool to listen to and watch.
Oh, I was blown away because, and we can touch on this later, but when you get into something like this, a lot of people are passionate about it and have their own expectations. You could kind of turn people off if you kind of do it wrong. For me, you guys kind of hit the perfect balance for what I would be looking for between sort of, honoring the original material, and then kind of doing its own spin and keeping it fresh. So I really loved it, and I was glad I could just chat about it.
Yeah,
it's cool. I appreciate that.
I think that's always like a push and a pull with me and Josh. Like that's always, I don't know about you, Josh, but I feel like that's the note I always seem to apologize about the most, when I'm like, so I know we're trying to do our own thing, but we also have to like not do it as much to turn people off. And I think that's always like the needle that is being threaded with these sorts of things.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very fine line between faithfully recreating the music and just keeping it intact to the way people that remember it, and keeping a lot of those elements that kind of trigger that nostalgia on a lot of listeners or players of the earlier game.
Right. Well, I guess taking it back a little bit, can you guys tell me a little bit, and maybe Jack, you could speak to this a little bit about the label, how everything started, how you two connected?
So I guess the label, so I'll start with the label, and it's mostly basically I was doing a lot of video and art under the label name prior to COVID. And I was doing a lot of like professional video production and stuff like that. I still am under a different company name. But basically when COVID happened, it was sort of like timed exactly with the Banana Jamz release, a little bit. So I was like, I'm just going to it just kind of was more popular than I thought it would be. So I was like, there actually might be something to this, especially if, video production is sort of dead for the foreseeable future. But Josh may actually be able, so to finish that off, I guess, the label just sort of pivoted out of my video production company. And it's still sort of just like ever changing as this gets crazier and crazier with like production and stuff. But Josh may be able to better explain how we actually got together in like 2017.
Yeah, so I found this database of job postings for different media types, and I basically made a profile as a music composer and producer. And I was just kind of like feeling really motivated, just applying to like a bunch of stuff that I saw. And I came across this posting that Jack had for something that he was shooting, video material that needed a theme song. And it was a like a horror anthology, and they wanted someone to write and record a theme song for it. And I was thinking, I have to do this. So I sent, and we joke about this now, like the most enthusiastic, like over the top cover letter, like I could possibly pump out. And we ended up working together for whatever reason. He picked me for the job, and we just, in my opinion, just like clicked really well. We just like got like our workflow locked in, and then he brought me another project and then another project, and we just like kind of like turned into this just like snowballing working relationship of just like whatever he had for me, I was like, let's do it. So yeah, and then that eventually led to Donkey Kong.
So how did that happen? Like, how did that idea materialize between you two?
I would say, like, from on my side, when I was actually working at a turntable manufacturer here. It was sort of like a Kickstarter thing in like 2016.
Me too, actually.
Were you?
Yeah.
Where were you working?
So I work for a company called Fluence.
Oh, do you?
I did until about a year ago.
Oh, wow, that's cool. We'll have to chat about that.
Yeah.
This company sort of just like blew up and then literally blew up. It was sort of like just a flash in the pan thing. But during that time, and I always collected vinyl sort of like on and off, I really wanted to press the Studio Ghibli stuff on vinyl. And I was sort of like a naive thought looking back on it, because it's like, of course, everyone wants to do that. But at the time I was like, wow, I'd really just love to press like Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind on vinyl. Did a couple of vinyl centric like videos with some friends and stuff like that. And then I don't know how I decided like video game soundtrack would be the thing, but I actually talked to someone who did the Zelda arrangement that was pretty popular a few years ago, and just asked sort of like the logistics of the legal side. And then once I sort of like had a half grasp on that, I basically just texted Josh. I think I was at like my niece's birthday party, and I was like, what do you think about doing this? Like just doing this album and see what we do. And then Josh turned around the first track, DK Island Swing, like he just did the drums and the synth. And like the minute he sent that to me, I was like, dude, I think we can do this. Like it sounds really good.
And you know what? I remember just my first impression of the album. It just sounded so good. Like there was such a great depth to just the tracks right from the start. I was really impressed with how it was all put together. Going from there, I guess, how did you make that project a reality?
Josh, what do you think? I'm trying to think back to like how we were like producing it back and forth, because it was like remote and then we did the final thing in person. But
yeah, we did most. I'm trying to think back to the very beginning. I think pretty much I would lay out like a framework, meaning just like having the drums and percussion like kind of loosely, like the flavor that I was going for, whether that meant like big, like epic cinematic stuff, like whether you were like hitting trash cans with like a ton of reverb on them, that kind of stuff, what type of synth textures I wanted, how in depth I wanted the orchestra to be. So I'd kind of like throw him like, here's what I'm thinking for this song. And then I would get an email back with it's honestly really efficient, just like bullet points of like, maybe try something different here. Maybe we could bring this up. I like this, you know? So it was just back and forth email until we kind of agreed on a track that we, and I feel like it was nice that we came to this point at the same time where we were like, okay, this is it.
I was just going to say, I think it works really well because at the same time, like I knew how to do video stuff, but you were also like kind of teaching me audio language. So I'd be like, I think these levels are a little high. And he would like nudge me and be like, yeah, let's save it for like mixing and mastering. So like
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. That was like a learning curve for me, but yeah, sorry, go ahead with what you were saying.
No. Where was I going with that? Oh, and it was funny. We like, cause I have a metal background before this. So just instinctually, I want like craziness all the time. And it's like a lot of times like Jack would like kind of rein me in and be like, maybe we don't need like drums like that crazy right there. Like maybe this could like we're at a 10, we could bring it down to like a 7.5 maybe. So
That being said, there were parts, like there's a couple of songs, like DK Island Swing, where like we stayed faithful, or like rather you stayed faithful in the beginning, and then there's a part where it sort of like transitions at the end and almost has like a I'm trying to think of what the band was, but regardless, like this crazy electronic drum section at the end, which I think like evolves it in a way that makes it your/our own too. So just stuff like that. And then there was definitely songs where like aquatic ambiance, where it's sort of like you really don't want to deviate much, because that's like a track people are literally going to like take the needle and drop it to. Whereas some of the other songs you can kind of like take a little bit more liberty with, in my opinion.
And then with kind of putting this together, it's kind of, you know, why vinyl? Why was that the medium that you guys kind of went with?
I think back to the Nausicaa Valley of the Wind thing. Like I just always wanted to like package a vinyl and like see, you know, what that process was like. I wish CDs were more popular, because that would be a lot easier. But,
yeah, for sure.
But like I love vinyl, so like I'm just joking when I say that. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a cool way to do it, because it's like it's a little more special, I guess. And like I always think it's crazy, not to like make it like all about like capitalism or something, but it is nice that like, you know, I've sent Josh checks for the work that we literally just like made out of thin air. And I think it's kind of cool that like we could make this profitable. Like not like buku bucks, but it's one of those things where like Josh spent months and months on this. So it's nice to see that he and I can both spend time on that and like not worry so much about the money portion, I guess.
Right.
Not that, I guess like there's a better way to say that, like spend time on that and still like it's not all for naught, I guess. So
Oh, for sure, right? You guys are seeing a return on that. You know, it's a huge investment on your end, both, you know, probably both financially for actually investing in everything, and then all the time and effort. So that's awesome, and it's nice to see people are appreciating that. I'm sure.
Yeah, it's like the same thing, like, you know, with artists and things like that. Like the dream, I'm sure, is like to be paid for, you know, whether it's writing or filming or painting or whatever it is. So, so yeah, that was kind of cool.
So when it comes to, I guess, the legal aspect, and this is one area I've always kind of been interested in, is how does that all work? Because you have this, you know, already existing work. How are you able to actually, you know, rework it and resell it? What are kind of the behind the scenes things that some of us wouldn't know?
The way it was explained to me, and I paid for like a consult with someone, because I think I had reached out to them via email. And they were like, yeah, for $75 an hour, like I could just explain this to you. So I was like, great, let's get on a phone call. The way it was explained to me is basically anything that's been released in the United States officially on that format. So if it's been released, or no, I think just a release, because it wouldn't be on that format. So as long as it's been published in the United States under the mechanical licensing law, which comes out of like randomly player pianos from back in the day. I guess like the whole thing was that like they wanted to be able to play like popular tunes in bars as cover songs. So it's like this weird law that exists. And now a bunch of people leverage it to do this kind of thing. There's like all sorts of official avenues you go through. Like there's all these companies who have sites where you basically just like upload the track list, everything you know about the album and the artist, and then they basically just like look it up and say, yep, this been released, it's going to be X amount per song per year, and then you kind of just factor that into the package.
I mean, the whole process, is it something, can any random person start their own record label and get up and running fairly easily, or is there a lot kind of that we wouldn't have seen behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think like it just depends like what you want to make. I think anyone can do it for sure. Like I have a friend who keeps kind of saying like, oh, I really want to do my own thing. I'm like, you should, man. Like it's, it's fun. I think the only part is sort of like the capital to, invest in like the records, and then like the part that, I don't want to say sucks, but the part that's like not, the sexy part is like buying cardboard and like
Right.
packaging like the records and stuff like that. But that's sort of like, I think it's sandwiched by two very cool process, which is like in this instance, like working with Josh, making the music. I love finding the artists, like the visual artist. Then there's sort of like all the crap in between, which is like money and manufacturing time and like figuring out how much it costs. And then at the end, you get to see all these people who have it, and like people like you who made a video, and you're like, okay, this was like a worthwhile endeavor. Like people are enjoying it, and we're kind of seeing the fruits of our labor. But it depends on if it's always a roll of the dice
Right.
for someone who wants to start a record label. And of course, I'm saying that, and I'm not saying that as like, I'm way at the top here. Like I have a very small catalog so far, but it's still been challenging, even just to have 7 or 8 records out. So
That's cool. It's cool to see you guys growing, and I'm excited for what could be there in the future. I guess I just wanted to go back and kind of talk about your experience with Donkey Kong. Obviously, there's so much nostalgia based on this. There's it's coming up on 28 years since the first one came out, and or something like that. 20. Anyways, it's getting up there for how long it's been. Like, what's kind of your experience and memory of these games?
I don't know if I'm shooting myself in the foot with this, but I have not played Donkey Kong Country the whole way through because I never had a SNES. I had the Game Boy Color one, which arguably maybe doesn't count, and I never made it past the first boss. The first level with the water, with aquatic ambiance, I think the one after that was where I was kind of tapped. And I guess I was like 5 at the time, but still, it's yeah. So that's my embarrassing but honest answer on it.
All right.
So,
all
but
right.
I do have Tropical Freeze though. But that's that. I've see. Here's the thing. I like the franchise a lot, and with what limited input I have to give with it. So,
and it's one of those things too. It's sort of like kind of like this Smash Brothers philosophy where it's like, I mean, it's just like in the ether too. So personally, we played it a lot. And again, that was sort of like why I reached out to Josh. I was like, I have a lot of experience with this game. I think it's got a cool soundtrack. And then, but yeah, when like I had a babysitter who used to play through it every time she babysat us, and we would just sort of like sit and watch. She crushed it. But anytime I would play by myself, like until I was in college, I never got past sort of where Josh got. Like I'd get to the first boss, and then I couldn't really do it when I was little. But always
that makes me feel better.
Yeah, I mean
that beaver was tough, man.
Yeah, especially when you're little. It's funny when you go back to those games too, and you're like, this actually wasn't that hard. But yeah,
I think for myself, kind of like a lot, of young kids who had older siblings who played video games. I did more watching than playing. So my brother would play all the time, and he crushed it. Like he would beat the game, finding all the bonus levels, all the DK coins, like everything. It was absolutely wild. And
wow,
I obviously would play a little bit, but I was never at his level. But again, I was kind of in love with the music there, and that's something that always stuck with me, even way past after the games were out.
Yeah, and I think it takes
Very
you
cool.
back to that, like when you're sitting crisscross on the floor
Right.
watching TV, and that like whether or not you're consciously aware of it, I think some of the music relaxes you a little bit because of that. So yeah.
Yeah. Josh, I mean, you talked about it a little bit, but I guess if you could dive deep more into the process for the tracks, did you find you would go in, track by track? Did you ever look at it kind of as a whole and return to it? How was that for you?
Yeah. So if we picture, let's just take Island Swing because we were talking about that, and that was kind of like the same formula for a lot of the songs. I would spend a little bit of time just like really getting to know the song overall, the melody, everything, every layer that I could pick out of it, all the harmonies, all the bass, what was going on as far as percussion, different textures, sound effects. Like you have a lot of songs where there are like bugs or like wind or animal noises or things like that, and taking all that into account. And then I would kind of like get that current song like drilled into my head, and then start imagining in my head like a newer version of it, kind of like what I would do if I was producing this song myself. So, for example, how that would translate is like Jack mentioned in Island Swing, the end, those kind of like heavy industrial drums and stuff. I snuck a bunch of like sub bass drops that just, if you're on like a really good system, you just hear this like bass rumble from the floor, and just kind of modernize it. You know, in my own music, I use a lot of orchestration and synth together, and I, in my opinion, think it's a nice blend of like textures and real orchestral instruments. I'm not playing the real instruments, but just they're sampled. And then every once in a while, I snuck in guitar parts, and those generally are played for real. So I would just go track by track, just kind of line up everything, each part that I heard, and I would typically start it with just the piano. So I would have like 10 piano tracks playing each line, just so I could keep track of everything, and then I would start translating each individual track into, you know, a more refined or more like kind of like final mix instrument, and I guess clay wheel it from there.
Okay. Now, one thing I'm dying to know is, are there any other versions or other remixes that are kind of on the cutting room floor that could be resurrected, that could be posted ever?
I don't know about that. So I have backups of everything technically. So in theory, we could go grab whatever we can. There was a version of Minecart Madness, I think, which was like the first draft that was way too heavy from where it, and I guess I'm admitting this out loud for the first time. Like I have a tendency to bring drums up loud, and I would like inch them up each draft. And there was a note where Jack sent me back an email, and he was like, "I don't know if I'm going crazy or the drums keep getting louder." And I was like, "No, he could." So, but yeah, I guess if we go back in the history, we could hear some wild versions that existed at one point.
Well, is that something you'd ever want to revisit, I guess, or is it, you know, you're done the project and you know it's all out there now?
I don't know. That's up to Jack if he would let me or not do a unedited, unfiltered take on something just for fun.
I think it would be cool, especially since we have like the Spotify so easily set up now.
Sure.
It's a little bit for me to like wrap my head around all that like administrative stuff, but it's so easy to like upload a song. Now, how like my personal, this happens with whatever I work on. I feel like I just get so tired after we work on it that I'm like, I loved it. I loved the whole process, but now I'm like, I'll never work on that again. Because it, like, I don't know if that's how you feel or not, Josh, but it's like it's a lot of work.
I'll admittedly sometimes go back into, I'll open up different session files for songs just for the whole throwback feel, and just look at all the tracks again and just kind of listen to what was going on. But I admit, if I were in a scenario where I opened that file and then I had my notes app up with a list of stuff to do, I might have a different opinion on it as how positively I'm, you know, looking in the moment there.
I think the one thing I have thought about if we did go back was, to Josh's point earlier, there is a lot of like sub-harmonic stuff. And unfortunately, I feel like just with the challenge of the format, you lose some of that, especially with a longer side. So one thing that I would love to do, and I think, you know, is if the popularity exists in a couple years, I would love to do like a limited 45 version. Just because I think that would be cool to really hear everything. So.
And there is a version of Island Swing too, or maybe it's Jungle Groove. They're so similar, whatever. That has like full, I think it's 14 or 16 layers of electric guitar, and I played the entire thing on just like really heavy distorted guitars. So that might be cool to break back out to at some point.
I think it is Jungle Groove.
It is Jungle Groove, yeah.
Because I want to say it's not on the album because they're so similar. And we were like, this would just be like, it just needs to be cut for time's sake.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? Yeah, that is what happened. Yeah.
Are there any tracks that you struggled with? You just didn't know how to approach?
Yeah. Let's see. Trying to think back. So I don't know if this is necessarily struggled with, but I was in a bit of a pickle with it for a little bit. When I did Forest, is Forest Frenzy on 1 or 2?
On, I think it's on
Or
one.
whatever Forest Interlude is on 2, I think.
Forest Interlude, yeah, that's 2.
Okay,
that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a great song baseline. So Forest Frenzy, I guess, is the first one on. It's the first like Forest one. I was really happy with where we were at, and I somehow deleted the entire file and had to start that song over. So, and my second time through it, it just like, I don't know if this is real or not, but in my head, the way I was perceiving it, I was like, this isn't as good as like the first one. And I kept checking my trash folder and like a backup, and I was like, I have no idea where the file went, but it's gone. So
I do remember that. I remember being like antsy about receipt. It sounded the exact same to me, but if I were editing that video, I for sure would have done the same thing where you're like, it's not the same.
And it like, I get like so obsessive over like where I'm dialing my knobs for like even like reverb, which like is like kind of ballpark. And I was like, I have this reverb called Black Hole that I like a lot. And I was like, this black hole just like isn't hitting the same way as the first time, but I have it kind of dialed similar. Like, what's going on?
I kind of felt like the second album stumped. I had a few more tracks that stumped us than the first, because I feel like the first I was so familiar with that I was like, oh yeah, you're gonna want to dial those drums here, do this, and the second game, although I did play it a lot when I was younger, I just didn't have like that level of familiarity with, because I think it was more of a, if I'm not mistaken, we rented that game more than actually owned it. And there were a lot of tracks, especially just like, let's call them like B-sides or whatever, where I was like, I don't know what we should do with this one. But, that it turned out great in the end. But that one I felt more stumped by personally.
And that game is harder.
Is it really?
I think so.
I downloaded an emulator for Donkey Kong Country 2, and the first level where you're like jumping up the mast of the ship, I was like, fuck this. This is great. I thought like 1 had me rocked, and I was like, this is such an ego check. And granted, I'm playing it on a laptop with like the ASD and like the whatever. So,
yeah. It gets so hard. There's I think it's Bramble Blast, where you're going through the vines. It's so damn hard.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you've got like the most like
calming. Yeah.
Like it's so oxymoronic.
Yeah. But that's the thing, that like those games had this weird calming vibe. There was intensity at times, but they're so calming. The levels, they all looked beautiful. For some reason, they feel like they still hold up, even though obviously they're dated. But it's nostalgia glasses that are looking back at that. But for a lot of people, they still gravitate toward the music. And do you think, why do you think that is?
I mean, I've done a lot of like analytical thinking on this, just based on like what we've been doing the last couple of years with this. Like, one, I think all those guys were like riding a zeitgeist of like technology, and they were like, I think I read like David Wise was like super into Phil Collins and like sort of like that quasi rock, but it's like, what do you want to call it? Like symphonic drum rock, kind of like post Genesis stuff. And like they were all just they were like younger, they were like doing their, they were just producing like really good work that they were excited about. It's the nostalgia thing. I don't know. I think like he was channeling stuff that was popular then. And, he was just at like, I think they were all just like feeling the mojo at that time and like just made something awesome. I feel like that just happens every once in a while, just sort of the apex of technology and good taste.
It's weird. Sometimes I ask myself the question, Is this really good music, or is it just nostalgia for me? And I don't know the answer to that necessarily.
I have the same quandary about like some Giorgio Moroder music, like the Neverending Story soundtrack. I'm like, this drum fucking kicks ass, but like, is it good? I don't know. It's just like I'm feeling great while it's playing. But yeah, I don't know.
It's kind of like that, the phenomenon where like it's like really common that people, generally speaking, like the work of artists that is older, and then
Right.
as you see them transform, people are like, oh, like they were way better band like 10 years ago. They were way better artists like during this record when they first came out. Is that nostalgia, or is it just like a genuine like, is that truly the like the best album that band has done 20 years ago, or are you just that attached to it? And if you dive into the neurology of that, is that just what you have the most triggers by,
Mhm.
so it's like this weird thing where you discern like your perception over uh I love the music from Pokemon a lot, and just I've been listening to like the Red and Blue soundtrack since I was like 5 or 6 too. So is that like, is that music like hit as hard as I think it does, or have I just like known what it is for like 23 years?
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if play this for someone that's never heard it before. I should test this. What would their reaction be? Is it this, like, does it sound like video game music from the 90s? I don't know, because there's some tracks, because of the orchestration, I think they sound almost beyond that, but I don't know. I think I'm just looking at it with my nostalgia eyes.
I'm like stumped by the question.
On the opposite side of it, if we go, well, we're talking video game music. I love the Assassin's Creed score as well, and like for many of them, and those are like relatively more recent. And I do feel like there's songs throughout those soundtracks where I'm like, that's a great song.
And that's what's cool, is a lot of video game music has gotten much more attention because it's gotten more sophisticated over the years. They've gotten better and better composers involved. Really, that medium has really elevated kind of all aspects of itself. And, video game music stands toe to toe with a lot of film music these days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of like crossover now too.
Yeah.
I think there's at least a couple composers who do both. And then you've got like the other example being like Quake, who like Trent Reznor did a bunch of that. Like it's just cool. Yeah, it's cool to see. I feel like before, from what I've learned or from what I thought or think now, is that before it was like, can this person technically program like on this Sega Genesis or on the Super Nintendo? Whereas now, like, you can really just put any file on the on the Blu-ray or whatever it is. So,
and that's the amazing thing. They had so many technical limitations, in '94 when they were doing the soundtrack, and what they were able to produce because of that is amazing. I remember watching a documentary of David Wise talking about that and how he handled that. I don't remember the details, but I remember it was quite the challenge to overcome.
Similar to what I was thinking is that, those types of guys also had to be tech savvy enough to squeeze the technology and use it in a way that it kind of wasn't meant to, like how it wasn't meant to work. They really pushed it to the max.
Now, did you guys talk to David Wise at all? Any kind of interaction or communication with him whatsoever?
I naively at the beginning of all of this did send him like a Facebook message and was like, and I'll preface this by saying, like, I was not aware of, like, I should have been more aware of it. I just never thought this way before about like the legalities, or like, if you were still a contractor with Nintendo, of course you're not going to want to be tied to this product or whatever. Not to say it's bootleg or anything, but obviously it's like, I wouldn't if I were him. But I reached out and said like, hey, would you want to do the liner notes? And he was kind enough to say like, hey, I think it'd probably be best if I wasn't involved, but like, wish you the best of luck with your project. So I actually have thought in the last year or so, kind of reaching out and being like, I didn't realize how naive that like request was. but would love to send you, 2 copies of, the album, just to see what you think, or just so that you have them. But that was kind of the extent to which I think we reached out to him.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, one thing is, so I've got both copies of Banana Jamz 1 here. Now, one thing
That's awesome.
Because I mentioned in my video, and this is true. I remember I listened to it so much at the beginning. I'm like, damn, I'm gonna wear this thing out like over time because it's so listenable. I'll just flip it over and just keep listening. But I guess, is there a reason why you guys changed the artwork on the second pressing of it? Because it's the whole thing, right? Like, it's the labels, it's a different color vinyl. Any kind of reason for that change?
There was some pretty big legals. No, I'm joking. Yeah. I personally just I don't know. I felt like the redesign, I always kind of wanted to redesign it. I don't think I was ever super happy with the first cover. I do like it, but I just think that the new design, especially with the house in the back.
Oh yeah.
I think just feels a little closer to the game. And I also, now that we're kind of doing the whole series, I kind of wanted to do something that would look the same. And the initial artist who did the first cover, he actually delivered it pretty poorly. So I had to fix a lot of it. And I don't think we would not work together again. So I was like, I think this needs to be with someone who's going to be there the whole time.
I guess, does that mean the third one is on its way as well? You don't have to answer if you don't want to.
It depends. I think we're pre-pro on it, probably would be a good way to put it.
We threw some emails back and forth about it recently.
Well, I mean, I guess part of that might depend on the success of the second one, right? Because that's on pre-order now. Is that correct?
Yes. And by the time this comes out, it will have it. We have a new color dropping tomorrow, actually.
Oh, cool.
For that, because it is coming out. It's supposed to go to be done by December 23rd, is what my client portal says. But I was like, I don't think that's very accurate, because it's 2 days before Christmas. So we should be getting it in January, which would be pretty cool.
And I've seen a couple of different. There's some exclusive variants, right?
Yeah. So Light in the Attic has one. So does Ship to Shore, and I think that's the extent. Yeah, things get a little crazy when you do that. So it's kind of I'm sure I'll get a lot of questions of why are you doing a random color now, tomorrow? But there was so many weird logistics with how many we could press, and just operations issues where I didn't actually know we were going to be allowed to press more until maybe a month ago. Because initially people had reached out and said we wanted, our own version. And before it had been this amount. And now they were we would like this many. And I was like, I did not account for that. So these are the, growing pains of the label where it's a good thing. But then I was like, shit, I don't have enough to do a general retail version. So yeah, it's just kind of crazy stuff like that. But yeah, there's some pretty cool variants out there now for it.
That gold one is so nice from the Australian one.
Oh, for the first one, yeah, for Banana Jamz 1.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, Mark, which design do you like better of the Banana Jamz?
In terms of the cover art?
Yes.
So I actually lean a little bit towards the first one.
Really?
For the most part, but because it's the same artist that did Banana Jamz 2, right?
Correct.
So that one I really like. So I like the execution of it on the second, but something on the front, and I can't place it. I don't know what it is that I don't like as much about it. I don't know if it's more cartoony than I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I still dig it.
Yeah.
But I'm just, I don't know. Again, I'm drawn to the first one, maybe just because it was there first, and I like it.
I do. Yeah, it's one of those. I mean, like, there's parts. I think I like the first cover. I like when I envision them all three together, or like all two together. I like the way they look. I think.
Yeah, and I like the idea of kind of a cohesive look to it. I think that will be nice when hopefully all three are put together.
For sure.
I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I actually do have a bootleg of the third one. If you've ever seen it
Nice.
in the wild. So
I have seen that one before, I think, just floating around.
Or unofficial. I don't know what the correct term is to use, but I found my way into some back alley Facebook group to be able to buy it. So I was very excited
awesome.
by that. They did. It's very good. I was very impressed. It came from somewhere. It came from like Kazakhstan or somewhere. I remember seeing the shipping, the stamps. It just had, I think, like 30 stamps on the box there, and I was just like, oh wow, okay, this is different. They did do one for Donkey Kong 2 as well, but that one's sold out and very hard to find. And on Discogs, they don't allow unofficial releases, so it's even tougher to find them.
Yeah, I can see that. That's why I'm hoping. I think I don't know. I'm curious, like how this, because they always like they're popular like when they come out, but I am curious like what the staying power of Banana Jamz 2 will be. Like I love the album. I always wonder like post life after the initial very excited people. Given that there's all these versions out there now of different things, whether they're bootlegs or MIDI versions or whatever, there's just like so many options. Whereas like when we started doing Banana Jamz 1, I think we were pretty much like the only legal version.
Yeah, there was one official one, but everything I read said it sounded terrible. And again, it was crazy price. It was like $1,000 on eBay. I'm no way. Like I like Donkey Kong, but not for $1,000.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it does, and then it's weird too because as we touched on, like it's such a personal nostalgia thing that I wonder, with the first one, I think there's like all this hype. The second one, people played almost just as much, and the third one, you wonder like where people sit on that, even with the soundtrack and everything. So
there's a lot of gems on the third one in terms of tracks. So I think on your end, there's definitely some good opportunity.
Yeah, that's kind of what we were throwing around. There was a few songs we emailed about the other day.
That ironically enough, Jack threw out like a list of songs, and I was thinking these are the same ones when I was listening through. I was thinking this will be a fun one to do. So
Rockface Rumble, I think, would sound really good. I think you could throw some good bass on that.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
There's a lot of like percussion too, which I think Josh kind of like brings to the table. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting too, because after doing 1, 2, then we did this Castlevania album, which in my opinion, is probably like, I don't know, just like the mix is so tight on that like I feel like Banana Jamz 3 would be the best sounding thing that we would have produced so far if it happens.
I agree with that. Yeah, I feel like Castlevania was a good learning experience as far as just like on the mixing end of things, doing stuff by the book a little bit more.
I guess even between 1 and 2, were there any learnings for you guys that you sort of applied after your experience with the first?
I'm trying to think timeline wise. So I think we started 2, maybe 3 months after. I think what happened was we finished Banana Jamz 1 in November of 2019, I think. Something like that. And then so this is a way longer time than I thought. We started Banana Jamz 2 in January of 2020. Working a little bit more on technique, on just how you could EQ things or just compress things instead of just like throwing knobs around like just like a crazy person with like just throwing darts at the keyboard kind of.
Yeah, I would say if you listen to I'm a psycho too, because like when I get mixes and stuff, I'm like touching the speaker and I'm like, is it punching enough? Like, is it like, but if you listen to that album, even after this, if you put it on Spotify for like, 5 minutes or whatever, like every song's, kick and bass and things like that is very like present and like physically felt on the speaker, which I think is cool. Which also I think, being that the sides are shorter on Banana Jams too, that's sort of like you feel a little bit more of that on the vinyl release too, especially with tracks like Bayou Boogie and things like that. Those are ones you can like turn up really loud and it sounds pretty cool.
I could see that. I'm very excited, mostly for Bramble Blast and Forest Interlude. So,
yeah, did you listen to them on Spotify?
Or anything? Yeah. Listen to them. I'll listen to them. My son will be around. He'll be like, "Hey, that's Donkey Kong."
That's awesome.
And yeah, because it's a way of kind of when I don't want to be a father for an hour, I'll be like, "Hey, buddy, let's play some Donkey Kong." So he'll just watch me play. But the only unfortunate thing is he'll want to play the same level. So he wants to play the lava level over and over. So I've mastered that one.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. I feel like, when I'm with my nieces, it's very repetitive as far as the stuff we do. So,
all right. Well, I guess, are there other dream projects on the horizon for the label? Anything else you guys want to tackle? If you want to kind of say it out loud.
I don't know if we'll ever do this, so I'll throw it out for fun just because I don't know realistically if this will be possible, but my like dream would be to redo Pokemon Gold and Silver, I think.
Okay.
If I had to pick one.
Yeah, I think we did talk about that, and then I forget what happened. I think I was looking at licensing or something like that. So that could be a cool project. And then for me, we talk about this a lot, like being like kind of obsessive people. Like I do think completing the trilogy would be nice, even if just from a completionist standard. I think that would be a cool project. And then beyond that, I really like doing these projects personally, but it is interesting to see now that like vinyl has gotten so popular, even beyond what it was like 5 years ago. Like it's not a matter of like if something will get pressed, it's more like when. So now I feel like when you do these like arrangement projects, which I'll admit when I started listening to vinyl, I was like, oh, I'm not going to listen to an arrangement. But somewhere along the lines, personally, I feel like I've found like the ultimate appreciation for them, where I'm like, if you love that soundtrack, it just sounds like different and there's a new way to enjoy it in this version. But it's sad to see that I think some people do not appreciate them. So that being said, from like I'm managing a label and spending money on stuff standpoint, I'm like, I would love to say another one of those is a dream project, but I wonder if we will do another one in the near future, aside from something like Banana Jams. But other than that, just like, games that I really like would be dream projects, but I'll remain unnamed for now.
Fair enough. You know what? I have a kind of a similar approach to arrangements, and even originally my attitude, I'm like, oh, I'm only going to buy the original or select albums. But where I kind of grew into it was I did feel like it was like a unique performance I was attending. It was like I'm going to a concert of this. They're doing cover songs or whatever, but it's a unique thing, and I just sit down and feel like I'm listening to this different version, but it's something new. So for me, I've really grown to enjoy that.
Yeah, and I think like the original version exists still.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah.
You're not
like
throwing that one away in lieu of this one. It's sort of like, it's interesting too, because I've bought a couple albums where I didn't realize I was consuming the arrangement before the original one.
Oh. And
then I'm sort of like, oh, the original one is so like tame in comparison to this. I don't know. I mean, it's so hard right now, like not to like end on a negative note, but it's so hard right now with like manufacturing stuff.
Oh, for sure.
it's hard to like, because you really do have to, you know, especially as like an independent label with no, you know, purely independent, you really do have to pick and choose what you do, because you can really only budget out like so many a year. And then you're talking about like, you're like, oh, I'd love to do this one this year. And then you're like, well, that's the only one we can do this year because it's on a 12-month thing or whatever. So it's crazy when you start being like, well, maybe we'll do that one in 2025 or whatever.
Well, I think a lot of the kind of the vinyl community has a pretty good understanding of a lot of the challenges. You know, production, we all know, has been crazy. Everybody has pre-orders and they go late. So I think it's fairly commonplace, and a lot of us, we kind of just want it eventually. We don't care when it comes out. We don't care about delays for the most part. There's vocal people who will be upset, but you know, we understand the production challenges, and even for an independent label, like you know, it's a ton of capital to put up. So you know, I get that.
Yeah. It's always, you always got to remind yourself too that, like, you know, usually it's a vocal minority,
Right?
But yeah. So I don't know. It's always exciting. It's always good to see, like, you know, it's me and Josh will always swap, you know, photos or Instagram stuff when people post, and that's always really fun to do. It's like a rewarding end of a 24-month process.
For sure. I know. I imagine that is rewarding to hear, you know, the positive stuff for all your hard work. I did a video with some guys about a year back, and we were having a conversation, and I think there was a question like, you know, what's something that you would love to see pressed that nobody would buy, or you know, a pressing of one, and my answer was, and I answered as you guys pressing it, because we also were like, who would press this? So my answer was Cartridge Thunder, and it was a video game called Top Gear. Top Gear 1 and 2. So that was for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. It was a racing game, and it has a pretty good soundtrack, but I imagine it doesn't have as big of a following as Donkey Kong.
You know, it's interesting because I think a friend recommended that too. Yeah, maybe cut this one out. Let's see if we.
Sweet. If this is the origin of that coming to fruition, that would make me very happy.
Sometimes I like that stuff because it's like like I said, I'm kind of like I'm a little bit of an obsessive person, but once you start doing that, you're like, did you know this composer from Top Gear like used to do this, and then he did this, and then you're like, I wonder if we can do him in the, you know, get him in the liner notes, or like, oh, did you know there's like a different cover for the PAL release? Like maybe we can put that on the OBI strip or whatever. Like, right. Just go down the rabbit hole with all this random shit that, you know, your girlfriend's really sick of hearing about. So Josh, what would be the album that you would want on vinyl that you may or may not know exists, or don't know if anyone would ever buy it?
Don't know if anyone would ever buy it. Probably the soundtrack for Goat Simulator, the most recent one. No, not really. Now this is video game wise, or anything.
Yeah, I guess so. You could do anything, but yeah,
anything that could be.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm actually stumped with that. I don't know if the soundtrack for Dishonored is really good, which I don't know if that ever got pressed, but I feel like that's a hidden gem that I don't see talked about very frequently. And if it is, I've just missed that. So.
Yeah, I could see. Yeah, I never got the chance to play that, but I could see that being a good one.
Mm-hmm. It's challenging, but the music's incredible.
Yeah, I feel safe saying this, especially since there's no chance that, you know, you could ever press it or that it will probably ever come out. But I'm just like continually stumped that like Nintendo doesn't just, you know, hire a team of 10 people to just like start a music division.
Right.
It's insane. Mm-hmm. Like they're sitting on, you know, at least tens of millions of sales. I legit think that let's say like the top side of like the realm is buying Taylor Swift's newest album. There is a complete equal amount of people on the underside that would buy Majora's Mask on vinyl or whatever it is.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. Like, I mean, however much she made from that album, I'm sure is equivalent to what they would make if they just pressed their back catalog.
Yeah, it's all there, and you've got a customer base of a bunch of millennial hipsters that want the stuff on vinyl.
Yeah. And you could do so much stuff with it. It's just crazy. But I did see, I don't know if I'm remembering this incorrectly, but I saw some statistic where they were saying that like Nintendo could, this is a couple years ago, they could like not sell anything and retain all of their employees for like 20 years and still just like coast on their existing capital.
Wow.
So it made me think, I was like, maybe they're just like not at all concerned with, money, but I don't know.
I mean, for them, it's probably just not worth their time considering everything else that they're doing. But hopefully that just means opportunity for, guys like you.
That's true. Yeah, it's a good point. Just, more arrangements to be had.
Yeah. Well, I guess going from there is what's the future of Cartridge Thunder and Josh for you? Is there anything kind of you guys have on the horizon?
Outside, I guess just music generally. I have a metal project that's called Andronicos, where it's just solo metal music. I play all the drums, bass, guitars, do all the singing. I'm like halfway into writing a second album for that, so I'd like to complete that. And my fiance Kate and she's a phenomenal vocalist, and we have a project that we're trying not to like talk too much about it right now, but we've been kind of brainstorming stuff for that and kind of like moving all the different like gears into place to get that machinery working. So
Yeah, and I am hoping, that all being said, I'm hoping I can steal Josh for a couple things this year still. But I was working on this documentary for games, like arcade games, and the more I realized all the interviews were kind of disparate, I'm actually thinking in the spring, as part of the label, I'm going to release like 8 of the interviews as like their own mini documentaries. But to tie in the music aspect, I think some of the soundtrack will be like arrangements, or some of the score to the interviews will be like arrangements of the games that, these people were in. So that'll be kind of a nice, way to satisfy the itch while the wait time of vinyl is happening. And then beyond that, just, more soundtracks. So.
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited about kind of the future and where you guys can go. If you do Donkey Kong 3, you have one customer for sure, but I'm sure many others. I appreciate you guys taking the time to chat today. It's always nice to meet people in the industry and learn a little bit about that behind the scenes stuff. Because for a lot of us, we press buy and pre-order, and that's about it. And it's just nice to get that in-depth look.
Yeah, we really appreciate you having us on and just, picking our brains. It makes me feel like I know something for once.
Yeah, it was super cool to get invited to talk with you, and that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you guys. So that's about all I have, and hopefully we'll chat again maybe in the future after 2 or 3 comes out, and we'll see where things go.
That's it for our interview. Thank you so much to Josh and Jack for sitting down and chatting. It was a really insightful conversation. I always enjoy learning a little bit more about the behind the scenes of what goes on into getting these records from concept into something that we listen to on our turntables. So really appreciate you guys sitting down with me. If you are interested, the Banana Jamz 2 record is still available for pre-order. It's actually shipping in the next few weeks. So that's very exciting, and get yourself a copy of that if you haven't already. And if you want, you could preview all of that on Spotify as well. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next time.